So we're going to first look at Halacha Kaf. This is from Ilchot Gneva in Rambam Perek Het. So we'll look at Halacha Kaf. Josh, you want to read that?
Sure. חייבים בית דין להעמיד שוטים בכל מדינה ומדינה.
Okay, so let's look at the translation of this one, right?
So it's an obligation for the beit din, for the court to literally make stand or to appoint.
To a point.
Police officers. And by the way, this was one of my potential topics for a thesis, looking at police officers in rabbinic literature. What are they? Who are they? I chose something different, but I'm still interested by that concept. I've only seen one book ever written about this. So to appoint police officers, all the provinces and all of the Pelech, like what is that, a town? Or
Pelech is region. Medina sounds like city, but I mean country, but actually it's city. So Medina is smaller than Pelech. So you have local and regional officers. Sheyu mehazrin al hanuyot. So they go around, right, from one store to another.
And they go around on a regular basis, right?
Yes.
Mechazrin. They shall go around on a regular basis to all the stores, and and they should calibrate or make right all of the scales and all the measures. And
Lifsok is to decide, to determine. So they actually determine the rates. This is like the stock exchange, the Feds, I don't know, whatever, we have equivalent, but they have the equivalent of deciding what is the going rate for certain products. You can sell over a certain amount, a certain price. So that's poskin at Asharim. So the extent of control that the rabbis demanded that will be on the hands of the Bedin is really regulating the market, and also checking physically the measurements and the weights and everything. V'chol mi
שנמצא עמו משקל חסר או מידה חסרה או מאזניים מקולקלים רשות יש להם להכותו כפי כוחו ולקנסו כפי ראות.
Sorry, one second. Yeah.
Okay. There's a part ראות בית דין מחזק הדבר. So in all, in anyone for which it's found with him.
Meaning wherever they found.
Wherever they found, chaser, like incorrect.
Incorrect balance, incorrect weights, right?
Right, weights, incorrect weights, or incorrect measures, or scales, kalim,
which are not calibrated. Kilkul is broken also, but means that it's not calibrated. So whenever they find that someone deviated from the norm, reshut yesh lahem leakoto kefi koho.
They are permitted to hit them.
Administer a physical punishment.
Beating.
Yeah.
Wow. Kefi koho ulak.
Bedin lehazek hadavar. So they could actually give him
according to the ability.
They could give him a fine. They could fine him. So what we find here that those policemen could issue lashes. I mean, as much as this person could take. Meaning it always was symbolic. The lashes were not physical, and lekonso, and to fine him So they could. This is what we actually do today because we know that for example, the kashrut system in Israel, the regulation has no teeth because the fines are not commensurate with the amount with the gain that people can make on selling non-kosher food. So in Israel, for example, if you sell non-kosher chicken as kosher, you will gain more from the sale than you will lose by the fine. But in America, if someone is misleading, giving misleading information, the minimum fine starts at hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's not worth it for people to do it. That's why you could rely actually more on federal information here than you have it in Israel. But we have this idea of deterrent that the fine will deter people from cheating because they will lose more by the fine. וכל מי שמפקיע את השער.
And wherever someone raises
raises the prices. The literal meaning of להפקיע את השער is to break the norm. להפקיע is to break or to blow. Actually, להפקיע, pkat is a bulb, so a bulb that grows bigger and bigger. So it's almost like ballooning prices. Inflation, interesting. This is etymologically very close to the inflation. So anyone who raises prices, הוא מוכר ביוקר,
or who sells
overpriced.
What's that again? The yoker is what?
So yoker is expensive. So it's the same thing. It's a synonym. מפקיע את השער הוא מוכר ביוקר. Meaning he breaks the rate. He disregards the going rate and sells above it.
He sells above it. Makin, they hit Makimoto. They hit him. A
lot of violence. Yes. Yeah.
The Choftin.
Oto. They force him.
They force him to, let's see, umocher
kesha'ar. Yes, he has to sell as the going rate. So that is with that we conclude that the segments that we were looking into in Maimonides. But what Rambam says is that it's the responsibility of Bedin to regulate the markets, to make sure that the weights and measurements and utensils are correct, to go beyond what the letter of the law says and issue fines and even administer physical punishment in order to make sure that the customer gets the right price and they're not deceived by the merchant. So all these is very very important halachot that we understand how thorough were the rabbis with their regulation of the marketplace. It's interesting because in comparison, for example, who did I speak to about that? In Islam, there's no financial system. I mean, there are no laws that regulate financial activity. In Christianity, as far as I recall, the one thing that is important is not to charge interest. And later on, in medieval times, since in the feudal system, Jews were not allowed to hold. In the feudal system, you either were a landlord or you worked with free trades. But since they were slowly pushed out of all the things, they cannot be. They couldn't, of course, not to join the knighthood. They couldn't own lands, and they were barred from many free trades. Then eventually they became money lenders. So they were beneficial to European economy, but at the same time they were reviled and degraded for being money lenders. But that's the only thing that they could do. And it's, like I said, forbidden in Christianity. In Islam, the written law of Islam, the Quran, doesn't offer any guidance regarding a financial system, and scholars say that probably it's because it started the whole Torah. I mean, their whole legal system was created in among the Bedouin society in the desert that relied heavily on barter and not money, and they didn't regulate really. This kind of financial regulations were not applicable to them. So it creates a lot of problems for Muslims today when it comes to the issue of what is allowed, what is not allowed according to Muslim law. And the next segment that we're going to discuss actually has to deal with when you have two clashing systems. One is the religious system, the religious Jewish system, and then the civil system, the civil court. In America, we usually think of it when it comes to aguna, to gitin, right, to divorces, but it has applications elsewhere. So let's look at that. This is from Aruch HaShulchan, the next segment, which many will call it by mistake Aruch HaShulchan, because they think it's the opposite, reversing the words of Shulchan Aruch. But actually, Aruch is imperative. Set the table. Like, when you say kum, get up, Aruch means set. So Aruch HaShulchan, set the table. It's taken from a verse in Yeshayahu. It was written by Rabbi Haim Epstein, who lived in the late 19th, early 20th century, and was poised at a certain point to become the major halacha book for the Ashkenazi world and probably beyond. But it was dethroned by the Mishnah Berurah of the Hafetz Haim that went more in the traditional ultra-Orthodox way, and there was a lot of also PR and marketing involved. Not in a mean way, but people saw it. This is like an ideological thing to preserve the traditional ideology, and Rabbi Epstein was more modern, more enlightened, and in a way it was pushed aside. So, but it's a very important book. So we'll look at this discussion. Is from Hoshen Mishpat, Siman Bet Saif Aleph. Lily, you want to read the first paragraph? Afal pi.
Sure. Afal pi she'ein danin b'chutza la'aretz dinei nefashot u'malkot u'knasot mikol makom im ro'im beit din shehasha'a tzricha lekach sheha'am perutzim ba'averot danim hakol kefi tzorech hasha'a.
Okay, Klomar.
So even though there isn't like a court,
there's no court
outside of the land,
to deal with.
Go ahead.
So dinei nefashot is capital punishment, malkot, lashes, knasot, fines. So, outside Eretz Israel, we don't have courts who could deal with all these things: capital punishment, physical punishment, or fines. Mikol makom.
So in any place.
However,
Imro'im Beit Din, if a court is seen, shehasha'a tzricha lekach. So. And the hour, is this some kind of idiom or something?
Yeah, it's an idiom. I mean, if there is a necessity, like the times have changed and now the times require that. Why is it required? Sheha'am purutzim ba'avirot, that people are, transgressing. Parutz, we usually associate puritzut with immodesty, but parutz literally means wide open. So, meaning there are gaps in the wall of Torah, and people do not follow the law as necessary. So, danim, hakol kefi tzorech hasha'a, all according to what is needed. So that is an important statement, which part of it is if you go all the way back, it's part of the debate between the people of Israel and the people of Babylonia in up until the 7th, 8th century, who has hegemony over or control over the legal system. And there was always this tradition that capital punishment and lashes and fines all have to do with the presidency or the princehood and the Sanhedrin in Israel, so you cannot do it outside of Israel. But this is part of the discussion of checks and balances. At a certain point, people realize that you cannot run a normal community or organization outside Israel if you don't not necessarily go with capital punishment or even physical punishment, but fines are extremely important, because if the what do you do, for example, like I said, if someone deceives a customer, right? Let's say I found out that one merchant deceived one customer, so I will make him pay this customer what was taken from him. I don't know how many others will do that. How can I assure that I can regulate all transactions of all merchants with all customers, right? I have to use fines as a deterrent. Just for an example, right now in the news we have the Wells Fargo scandal, right? And we have the CEO, whatever it is, Stumpf, walking away with $200 million salary, and he fired 5,300 employees. So it's the employees who carry the burden of this, and he walks away with $200 million. Now, even if you want to give him the full extent of the punishment, right, and pay back the $200 million, who knows what other assets he has that we are not aware of. But now, for example, the state of California decided not to do business with the bank at a state level. So this is kind of a fine that the kind of power that the state can exert on individuals or merchants in order to assure that we have honesty and integrity. So that, I think, is at the core of this halakha, is the idea that we have at a certain point to get out of this narrow mind frame, state of mind that we only do what the halakha says, and rather look at it, what is the purpose of the halakha? What does God want me to do? So we look at the text of the Torah and say, the Torah is not just about, okay, pay this, don't pay that, have this measurement or that, whatever, but rather it's about getting the economy moving. We have to make sure that the economy does not come to a halt, but also to make sure that people do not take advantage of the system to benefit on the back of others. For example, another example is, this ideally, in an ideal society, we had to make sure that very, very wealthy people do not take advantage of the system in a way that they never pay taxes, where the people who make a normal salary pay 10 or 15 or 20% of their income, right? So all this is included in this thing. People are transgressing, meaning here the transgression is against other people, taking advantage of them. So all is according to the necessity and the time, right? Okay, so we still didn't finish this halakha, so let's go read through the end and then see what is the conclusion. So, Rebecca, you want to read this va'afilu? Yeah? Okay.
Did you send us this text?
Yes, it's in the... You want to read? Go ahead.
Ve'afilu kesheroim leachit shehu parutz ba'averot יכולים לכנסו כפי ראות עיניהם ובלבד שתהיה כוונתם לשמיים.
Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have to be at the state level, right, or a community level. Even if there's one individual, one person who misbehaves, he could be fined and punished. So this highlights the last halakha that we read in Maimonides, right? Where we were surprised. Oh, they could fine them, they could even administer lashes. Kefirut enhem bilvad shetiye kavanatam lashamayim, as long as they have this pure intention, really to not to abuse their power. So, and we'll see there's constantly this struggle between of checks and balances, trying to make sure that on one hand the the judges have enough authority to do what's necessary, but they don't take advantage of the system to abuse the system or the people, right? So I'll read the next one. So he builds this gradually. So first, even though you can't do all these all these legal processes, but if there is a need, you could do it. Now he says the need not necessarily stems from a whole community does it, even if it's an individual, because this is where the judges or the court identifies a phenomenon that could spread and get out of control, so they want to nip it in the bud. But then he says this: "Va'afilu en badavar edut gumura." You don't even need the what qualifies as a testimony with two witnesses, etc. Ela sheyesh raglaim ladavar. There is raglaim ladavar literally means the object or the issue has feet. I mean, it's walking around. So it means that, or it stands. It's established. So as long as there's basis for the rumor, right, then you have to investigate and do something regarding the matter. I mean, if it's completely made up, there's no like all these conspiracy theories and the Inquirer, etc. Yeah, you don't have to address it. But if there's a good reason to believe that what people say is correct, then the Beit Din must engage and take care of it. Vekala de la pasik, and there's an ongoing rumor. This is from Aramaic. It's a phrase very common in the Talmud. Kala, it's from the word kol, right? La pasik, not ceasing. So you have an incessant voice that says, or rumor that says, this and that bank or merchant or individual is engaged in an illegal practice. You cannot say, oh, we haven't seen anything, we don't have witnesses. You must investigate. Also, you know that there are this person or entity does not have enemies that are the ones who produce this rumor. Then if you see, if it's necessary, they should do it. If they have the ability. Now that's an important phrase. Why do we read this? If they have the capacity to do it. Because in many cases the Beit Din did not have the capacity. They did not have the like what Josh mentioned before, reading about the policemen. They didn't always have the executive branch. They had the legislative, which we had the court, we had the rabbis, but when it came to imposing it or forcing the warring parties to follow the verdict, not always they were able to do it. But we'll see it later. So,
Rabbi, I'm sorry.
Yes.
The first part of that. So what is the situation?
We're here.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So let me give you an example. Okay, I'll read it to you at Teshuvah. There's no Nikud, so I'm going to read this. It's a very interesting Teshuvah. I'll just give you an example. Here, it's on page 10 here. So this is from a Shalot Teshuvot, Maharashdam, Rabbi Shmuel di Modena, who lived in Turkey in the 16th century. Rabbi Shmuel di Modena is a very important posek, halachic authority, and we don't have the full question, but from his answer we can understand what the question is, and this is what we call maybe circumstantial evidence case. So here's this Teshuvat She'ela. He says here is an answer to your question. Ha'emet כי אחר שנמסר העניין זה ביד הדיינים החכמים השלמים, אשר עמהם חוכמה עצה וגבורה. Says, since this matter was already handled by the judges who are wise and wholesome, and they are the ones who have wisdom and counsel and might, היה מן הדין לכל אדם ימשוך ידו מלהיטפל בעניין הזה. That ideally I should not have dealt with it, to leave it for others. So we already know that this specific question was already dealt with by other judges before it came to the Maharashdam, Rabbi Shmuel Dimodena. But he goes on, he says, Omnam, lihiyot ki miderech hashlemim lefachet tamid. But as a righteous person, you always have to be concerned. Lefachet is to fear, but what he means is you have to be concerned. You cannot sleep calmly, knowing that someone might be suffering or someone was wronged. And you cannot cover by saying, oh, I don't have enough details. ובפרט, מדין שצריך לדונו בעומדן דעת. And he says, this particular case, and we'll see what is the case that he's dealing with. Basically, it's a case of theft or burglary, that we have no witnesses for the burglary, but there is circumstantial evidence. Says, דין שצריך לדונו בעומדן דעת. This is something that has to do with the assessment and maybe you could call it the hunch of the judge. ואמרו חכמים עליהם השלום, the rabbi said, שאפילו שבדין שלושה בדין שלם הוא, even though a bedin of 3 people is a bedin, is a perfect bedin, כל זמן שהם רבים, הרי זה משובח. The more, the better. We need more opinions there. אשר על כן נתפצרתי ונתפייסתי להורות דעתי בעניין זה. Therefore, I decided I'm going to express my opinion on this matter. אם ייטב בעיני הדיינים השלמים, of course, if this will be accepted by the other judges of the city, and this is an interesting comment. This is taken from a phrase in the Talmud. Ki heiche denim teli imahem shiba mikeshura. So he says, I am going to get shiba mikshura. Kshura is a log, is a log, a beam of wood, and shiba is a splinter, like a toothpick. So the phrase is mentioned in the Talmud regarding a certain complicated case, that the rabbi, when he had a complicated case, would gather 10 judges with him or more, and he said, I want to split the burden, meaning that they looked at it as a responsibility, that if the court makes one person pay the other party, it's a question of liability. Today we call it insurance. So their insurance was, what if they issued a wrong verdict, and now the wronged person proves his that it was a mistake, and he demands that the bedin will pay back, that the court will pay back. So the more judges are involved in the process, each one of them has a smaller share of this liability of what they have to pay back. So this is literally a shared responsibility, but also an abstract concept when they say, if we're making a mistake and only God knows, so God will put the responsibility on all of us. So he says, this is his introduction. You see, this full thing is an introduction just to say, why am I getting engaged in this whole situation? Because I feel that he doesn't want to openly criticize the other rabbis, but he does that. He says they are wholesome, wise, well-rounded people. But if you are that person, you cannot rest until you find the truth. And I feel that I have to say something. Omer ani, ki libi omer li. This is what I say. This is my hunch. שמאחר שהדבר ברור, since it's obvious, כי הפרטים לא תקיף בהם הידיעה, you can never cover all details. It's an important statement. That we spoke about it before, each case brought to court is different just by being, by the fact that it happens in a different place, different time, different people, even though it seems to follow the same formula. והמאורעות הנמצאות בכל יום משונות זו מזו. The events of each day is different than each other. ואם כן, אי אפשר לחכמים, it's impossible for the scholars לכתוב כל הפרטים ולהעלותם בספר. So even if we wanted, can you imagine like a sefer, a book of halacha that will cover all possible scenarios? It's impossible. You have to create rules and let people put them together and get to the it's a good exercise that we sometimes do as a educational game with kids. We ask them to write the instruction for a daily routine, right? Like making a cup of coffee. So they could say, boil water and put a spoonful of coffee and fill up the cup, right? But I said, no, I want you to cover everything. So walk to the fridge, walk here, twist the knob right for the tap, and all these things. So it's really even such a simple thing is complicated writing. So even more so when you come to din ela she'anu lomdim inyan me'inyan kayotze v'chadome lo. We have to use the power of analogy and of a critical analysis to compare one matter to another matter. Gam matzanu ra'inu ma shekatav Rashba, and by what we read before here, for in Aruch HaShulchan is from Rashba. Rashba is Rabbi Shlomo ben Adret, who lived. Some people call him by mistake Ben Aderet, because the word Aderet in Hebrew means robe. So they think it's a Hebrew word, but it's Adret. It's from the word Adroat, which means the right in that whatever dialect it was of Spanish or Catalan that he used. And the Rabbi Shlomo ben Adret lived in the 14th century, and he writes, this is what, now we go back to Rabbi Shmuel di Modena, and he writes, כתב הרשב"א, גדול הפוסקים, he was one of the great poskim, decisors of halacha. What did he write? שאם העדים נאמנים אצל הברורים, if you have reliable witnesses, רשאים הם לקנוס ממון, they are allowed to issue a fine, או לענוש עונש הגוף, or even use corporal punishment, כפי אשר ייראה להם, in what they deem necessary, וזה מקיום העולם, and that's part of the sustenance of the world, of establishing the world, שאם אתם מעמידים הכל על הדינים הכתובים בתורה, because if you would follow the letter of the law, it will be destruction. It will lead to destruction. Meaning, we just like, and this is, I know it sounds like a political statement, I mean, I'm not involved in that, but when during the debate, Hillary Clinton asked Trump for his tax return release, and she said he never paid federal taxes, and he responded with, "That makes me smart," right? Now it's an entanglement trying to, how do you explain to people that this is what you do? But he could say, "I'm doing everything legally," right? But doing everything legally for you spells huge losses for other people, right? So that's destruction. That's not an ideal situation. So either we change the law, or we find ways to interpret the law, or we make sure that everybody have their share in this. Here it says, "Od samachti." Now he quotes the Rambam. This Mishu Ramai umekulkalin drachav. You have someone who's known as a crook, and his ways are distorted. Ve'amud sheyesh lo mamon, and we assess, or we assume that he has money, right? So this is an interesting word that we have to know. the word amad, Aleph Mem Dalet, the verb amad, is not Hebrew, is Aramaic, and means to assume, or to even to guess sometimes. So when I say umdan da'at or le'emod, it means I assume that this is the quantity or the price or whatever. Like it's a guess. It's an educated guess. So from here we have the noun amid, Aleph Mem Yud Dalet, which means a wealthy person. Because it means that this is someone who people think of him as a wealthy person. So amud sheyesh lo mamon. So we have this person who's a crooked person. People think that he has money, or people know him as a vetoren she'en lo, but he argues that he has no money. V'hu bali shava betakana zo, and he now wants to. So this would be, for example, someone who claims he has debt, he owes money, and people sue him, and he says, "Yes, I owe money, but I have no cash, I have no assets from which I can pay back the debt." And he wants to swear. Now, technically, like we tell that person, we don't know if you have money or not. We're not going to go into your house, or there was no bank account at the time, but we can't tell whether or not you have money. But what we could do for a regular person is to make you take an oath. Now, why does an oath work where witnesses or other things would not work? Because people have this kind of a superstitious fear or religious fear of God, who is is omniscient and is present in every transaction. So you would have situations where people are not reluctant to steal money or to embezzle or to deny their responsibility to others, but they would be reluctant to take a false oath. So this is our last resort, sort of, when we deal with people that we don't know whether they don't have money, etc. So we tell them, okay, take an oath. If you swear that you have no assets, we trust you. Now that man comes to court and he's being sued to pay back his debt, and he says, I have no money. We don't believe him. He says, I will take an oath. So Rambam says, En ra'ui le'ashbi'o. You cannot, this is not, even though the protocol calls for it, you cannot make him take an oath, because he's already not trustworthy, because we know that he has money. Now he drives around in a fancy car and he says, I have no money. So this he can't argue that. Ela, so what you should do is, Im yesh koach ladayan le'asoto ad she'ifra. The dayan, if he has the power, the authority, he should be me'aseh. This is the reflexive of la'asot. It's a term that la'asot is to do. Le'asot, the nikud would be, if I add the nikud 1 second, the nikud would be le'asoto, like this, means to make him do it. This. Le'asoto ad she'ifra, so the dayan is allowed to force him until he pays back. So, Josh, this is a long answer to your question, but basically, what we see here, that the Rabbi Shmuel de Modena gives us a very long introduction where he says, I have a situation, it's a very delicate situation, complicated case, there are no witnesses, but I have a hunch and I have circumstantial evidence, and I'm relying on the fact that what the Rashba wrote, that you cannot legislate and write all the details, and I also rely on what Maimonides says, that if I have a feeling that the person who's now being standing trial is a crook, I have to make sure that he pays back. This is like, to make an analogy, a person who comes to court and is accused of stealing money from parking meters, right? And there are no witnesses, so he's being they let him go, but they say you still have to pay a fine for disturbing an officer during work. The parking officer,
Enforcement.
right? The parking officer, and you know what he says? He says, "Can I pay in quarters?" So, can the judge say, "Okay, you know what? Come back. We want to reconsider the case"? According to Rambam, yes. The judge would say, "Yeah, we thought we have no evidence, but now the joke is over, and this is for us as a proof enough that you stole quarters from the parking meters." So, klalo shel davar. What is the rule here? The general rule: Kol ma sheyaseh badvarim elu. Whatever the judge does, v'kavanato lirdof ahar hatzedek. But you have to know. I mean, the dayan, the judge, also have to have this integrity that he's really pursuing justice. Leshem shamayim. Lamadnu mizeh. What we've learned, sheyesh koach l'chachamim. The rabbis do have the authority. Kasher kavanatam l'shamayim, where their intention is pure. La'asot ma shelibam omer lahem shu emet la'asoto. To follow their hunch. To feel if this is the truth, this is what I'm going to do. Right? So it's a very tricky situation, dangerous terrain, because every judge could say, "Oh, I feel this is the truth," right? I feel this is the truth. So we rely here. It's only in monetary issues. We rely here also, I would say, on community and other judges that will monitor that will not let this go out of hand. But you're right. If there would be only one judge, we would have a problem. So we to sum up, the bedin must step into the situation and take care of it, to follow truth and justice. Vegam yecholet ladun lekol adam kifi ma shehu. We do take into account the history and reputation of the person who is being accused or being brought to trial. Sharei, in this case, lo ikarnu leish hazeh shu avaryan. We don't know that he's a criminal, but anu roim drachav lo tovim en raui la'amino b'shvuato. We know that he has questionable behavior, so we cannot trust him when he's taking this oath. So now we get to the case, okay? And all that is when we're going back, to trying to understand this statement of Aruch HaShulchan, where he says, "Afilu en badavar edut gumura, ela shesh raglaim ladavar." We don't have witnesses, but we have raglaim ladavar. There is a basis for that rumor. So what is this case here? Ahar she'adanu ve'en etzenu safek shenignav mibet ploni kol tachshitav kesef ve'zahav u'ma'ot rav. So I break it down here into the arguments that he make. What we know is that a certain home was broken into, and all the jewelry, silver, gold, and many coins were stolen. And then betoch zman zeh, and later on, matzanu ra'inu laish hamekulkal b'drachav hotziu elu advarim. And then we saw some of the stolen objects in the possession of that man, of the accused. Ve'yadua shekefi hasimanim kol zahav hanizkar hu mibayit Yehudi. And it's obvious that this gold comes from a Jewish home. We don't know yet which home, but we know it's from a Jewish home. Probably they had, different type of jewelry, or maybe different ways of processing the gold. וגם ראינו שלא הוציא דבר מזה לשוק. He didn't put anything in the marketplace, אלא אחר שראה הנתפסים שנתפסו על זה, נפטרו מתפיסתם. Only after he saw that the people who were captured, tafas, right, were captured as suspects, they were released from jail or from custody, from whatever it was, only then he put those things in the market. So isn't it interesting? This is like 400 or 500 years ago in Turkey, but it has all the elements of something that you could see today in a robbery, right? A burglar or a robber takes whatever he takes, and then he waits for the investigation to die, for the public interest to die. He sees that some people were captured as suspects and they were released, so now the case is sort of is dead or closed. But so the first evidence, the first circumstantial evidence that Rabbi Di Modena mentions is that the gold comes from a golden home, from a Jewish home. Sorry. Let me put this in bold. The second thing is that lo hotzi davar mize lashuk. He waited. He did not release these things to the market. Also, en safek badavar shezahav ze o genavo, that he either stole the gold or lekaho miganav sheyadar shaya ganav, or he took it from someone whom he knew was a thief. Meaning that man, if he's not the burglar himself, he's the accomplice who buys the stolen merchandise. How do we know that? Kevan shelo yada b'mishkal hazahav. This is another part of that circumstantial evidence. Yes, Rebecca? You had a question or? Okay, fine. So he doesn't know how much the gold weighs. Meaning that when they found the gold in his possession, they asked, how much gold do you have? He says, I don't know. And it says, En adam asui lit'ot kol kach. If it's yours, and I think it's correct, right? If you had gold, you keep monitoring, how much gold you have, and you wait and you keep track. To not know how much gold you have means that it's not really yours. That if it's a pound or less or more or less, you don't care because it's not really yours. You're trying to get rid of it. Gam shaya olech umevakesh le'atich hazahav ze'er sham. He would also go and trying to melt the gold. Ze'er means small, in small quantities. So we'd go to different goldsmiths or different craftsmen and ask them to melt the gold from him. And like it says here, B'hanuyot mehulafot ve'umanim mehulafim. He would go to different stores, hanut, and different craftsmen. Ve'adavar nikar la'ain, and it's also obvious. Oh, sorry. And it's also obvious, shehithil hu le'aticho. He started the process of melting the gold. וכשלא עלה בידו היטב, הלך אצל האומנים. And when it didn't work for him, he went to the goldsmiths. So first, I think it's fascinating that you see that sort of investigation, right? It's NCS and what do you call it? CIS, crime, CSI. Sorry, like I'm not there, but it's like. Right, crimes investigation, but by Rabbi Shmuel Di Modena, they go with all the details of what did this man do with the gold, etc. So how do we know that he started melting the gold? כמו שניכר זה, מעדות הנבון רבי יעקב דיקואנקה יצאו, ישמרה צורי ויפרקה, may Hashem protect him and prolong his life, ששאל ממנו את הכלי הגדול, אשר יכולים להתיך בו ג' או ד' ליטרין. So what they found that Navon is a wise person, Rabbi Yaakov Dikoenka, who probably was a goldsmith, and he testified that this man borrowed from him a furnace that could be used to melt 3 to 4, it's almost a volume of a gallon of gold. It's a huge amount. It says, וזה לא נמצא בדבר הזה לדעתי ב-50 שנים. That was not found, we don't have an analogy in the last 50 years, meaning recent memory, שיבקש אדם she'eno uman kli kazeh. For someone who's not a professional goldsmith to ask for to borrow such a furnace is highly uncommon. ואפילו לפי מה שאומרים שאמר שלקחו מיד גוי. So now he goes to the argument of that person. So that person was found. So let's go back and review the case. A huge amount of gold and silver was stolen from a Jewish home. The man was found. I mean, after a while, a long time, the gold was found in the possession of a Jewish man, who went from store to store trying to melt small quantities of the gold. And he borrowed a utensil that people usually do not use unless they are professionals. He claims that he bought it from a non-Jew and that non-Jew disappeared and he never knew that the money was stolen. And so he says, even you have no proof that this is the stolen gold, and even if you do, I never knew about that. And he says, ולמה לא בא אצל יהודי מהאומנים הכשרים וישביעהו וייתן לו זהוב אחד כדי שיתיך לו אותו זהב או כסף. So he says, okay, you had a simple solution. Which, by the way, this phrase teaches us a lot about the commercial and the business world of Jews at the time, which still exists today in some communities. It says you could have gone to a trustworthy, kasher, right, reliable, trustworthy person, who's a Jew, yashbi'ahu, and make him take an oath, and then pay him, yiten lo za'uv echad, pay him for melting the gold or silver. So why does he have to go into all this trouble? Because obviously Jews did not want the government to know the extent of their business transactions. It's still true today. Most people don't want the government to know too much about their transactions, but religious authorities ideally do not encourage people to hide money from the authorities. But the reason that we don't do it today is because we live under we could say, a benevolent or righteous government, whereas when you look at the Ottoman Empire 500 years ago, this was not the case. So even if the rabbi does not promote it openly, but he acknowledges that this is what people do because they know that if the sultan or the viziers or whoever is in charge finds out about this money changing hands, he will try to take a chunk to himself. So they try to keep their wealth under the radar. There are pictures from. I'll try to find and show you later, but there are pictures from the houses of Jews in Aleppo and in Damascus, of the wealthiest families, that there's such disparity between the way the house looks from the outside and the inside. You go in the outside, it looks like another, dilapidated building, and when you go inside, there's a beautiful, amazing courtyard with water fountains and also marble and this, and the same thing in the house. But they were trying to keep their wealth away from the authorities. So why didn't he do so? And also, this is another thing. The Ashbiyahu goes back to the concept that we mentioned before, that a religion is important to commercial communities, because this is the only way that they could, have trust among themselves. Like the diamond merchants, the Hasidic diamond merchants from Belgium and Borough Park and Williamsburg rely on the fact that as religious people they will not cheat each other. But when there was a deviator, there was one Hasidic merchant who tried to cheat others and run away with diamonds. He was murdered. He was punished severely. So this is what we learn from here is how the religious community uses the common trust and religion and faith as a sort of a character like testimony, like we know that person is honest. So he could have done that. He could have said, I bought it from a non-Jew, or I got it from a faraway place. כפשיטה שלא היה בא לו נזק והפסד כלל ועיקר. If he would have done so, he wouldn't lose any money. He would melt it for a minimal fee, and he would have it all available. אלא שניכרים הדברים שפחד שמא יכירו האומנים הכלים. He was afraid that the craftsmen will recognize the utensils, because it's, we're talking about a small community. You're bringing the utensil to one of the goldsmiths in town. He knows who made it. ויוודע הדבר לבעל הנכסים, and then it will become known to the original owner. וכמה רחוק לומר שמא מאדם אחר נפל או נגנב לא מזה התובע. And it's improbable to say that it fell or was stolen from another man. De'im ita kala itle. If this would have happened, we would have known about it. If it happened if it was taken from another person, if there was another theft at that scale, right, in town, we would have known it. So he says, "Vedavar she'en bo safek she'en adam ze shenimtza beyado." And also we know that man who had the gold, and no amud, is not the type of person to have so much gold. So bottom line, it's like we have this case that obviously it was discussed by other judges before Bishmuel de Modena, and they said we don't know what to do with this case. But he says it comes from a Jewish home. He didn't release it to the market until much later. He tried to melt it in small quantities with many different craftsmen. He tried to melt it by himself. He tried to borrow a big vessel to do that. He claims that he took it from a goy, but he never said that he could have done that. Go to a Jew and tell him that. It's obvious that he was afraid that the vessels will be recognized by the craftsmen, and they will tell the owner. We can't say that it was stolen or taken from another, because then we would have heard about the other robbery or theft. And finally, he says that man is not, his lifestyle does not indicate that he carries with him this amount of silver and gold. So all this circumstantial evidence leads us to what? To assume that this person is the thief, right? So what would we do in a modern court? What did they do back then? So I say maybe we'll take a break and a couple of minutes, and then we'll finish this teshuvah. Okay.